Hello, I'm Craig Higdon for Reel-to-Reel Productions. The video you're about to watch was taped at the 1999 UIL State Meet. There were no special lighting or microphones used, and the camera was intentionally placed at the back of the room. This is to avoid any distraction to the competitors. What you will see is what actually took place during the round. If you watch videotapes of more than one conference, you'll notice a wide variety of speaking styles and strategies. I hope you enjoyed this round. Good luck in competition, and may good sportsmanship always prevail. Thank you.
Observation 1 is the inherent U.S. assistance to Russia pursues contradictory goals, which results in the exacerbation of Russia's deforestation crisis. The U.S. must act now to avert this crisis. David Gordon, director of the Siberian Forest Protection Project, explains that all for you in 1996, U.S. government agencies are fighting each other over the fate of the forest, while some U.S. agencies are funding Russian environmental organization programs to implement watershed protection measures. Others are funding feasibility studies to pave the way for logging by U.S. companies. The battle is emblematic of the Clinton administration's contradictory policy goals for the Russian Far East. U.S. government agencies are now implementing initiatives intended to protect biodiversity, improve forest protection, and promote environmentally sustainable development. At the same time, other elements are trying to open doors for U.S. businesses to extract natural resources in Russia. U.S. government agencies are supporting major international investment in logging without full public disclosure and public participation by U.S. or Russian citizens. Whether these forests will be logged quickly for short-sighted, unsustainable resource extraction or sustainably managed to promote diverse local economies may turn on which the competing Clinton administration policy fractions wins out. Observation 2 is the harms. We isolate two scenarios. Scenario 1 is genocide. Unsustainable logging in Russia is destroying the Yugoslav people. Tantamount to genocide. Jones in 97, the traditional way of life of the ancient tribe of hunters in Russia's Far East is facing potential destruction as logging companies plan to plunder the habitat that has sustained the tribe for more than 15 centuries. The rights of the Yudegi's timber-rich environment are being signed away to companies to plan to open the area for large-scale forest clearance. What is happening is genocide. Such as the Yudegi reliance on the forest that once it is tampered with, they will not be able to continue their existence in its present form. The contradictory U.S. foreign policy is responsible for the savage destruction of the Yudegi. Kara Williams, writing in the LA Times in 1996, that even the last of the disappearing Yudegis are giving hope for preserving the native cultures, undermines their efforts to protect the small peoples of eastern Russia from foreign timber interests that would forever change their venue. Russia has home to more than 25% of the world's remaining woodlands, and the newly opened, largely underdeveloped Far East region has become a magnet for Pacific timber rim interests, especially U.S. firms searching for fresh wood supplies. The U.S. government finds itself in an unwitting quandary, simultaneously financing both logging proposals and the determined efforts of ecologists to save the Far East for its native peoples. The conflicting program means U.S. taxpayers are footing the bill for both sides of the timber versus biodiversity struggle. Current logging has left indigenous people with no survival resources. Williams again. Today, the indigenous people with once fish trapped and hunted in the pristine watershed have little money and less use for the talks of their bygone traditions. Most Yudegis are jobless, despairing in the prospects of fighting off an inevitable influx of logging ventures. We have the same ways and habits as the Russian now. People have to live somehow. Now is the key time. Guaranteeing sustainable forestry is critical towards establishing a social and economic infrastructure. The World Bank 97. The recent collapse in production of the forest sector is also the result of unsustainable resource exploitation. The crisis is aggravated by serious financial problems facing the forest-related public agencies and private enterprises. Despite these problems, the forest sector still has considerable potential to contribute to national environmental, social, and economic development goals, but significant changes are needed in the management of the forest in Russia to meet its stated goals. Achieving these goals will require fundamental change in forest management, particularly in harvesting and regeneration methods. Preliminary information suggests the overall sustainable production for Russia for the next few decades is likely to continue below pre-1991 levels because of past exploitation patterns. Scenario 2 is biodiversity. Russian forces are on the brink of irreversible destruction. This threatens to destroy unique species and ecosystems that are critical to planetary biodiversity. The World Bank in '97, the vast ecosystems offer one of the greatest and last opportunities to conserve unique assemblages of species that surpass those found elsewhere in temperate forests and the levels of diversity. If the problems afflicting the forest sector are ignored, appropriate public and private actions are not forthcoming, conditions in the forest east of the Ural Mountains may be irreversibly altered to the detriment of the region's environment and economy. Dangerously, current policies undermine efforts at conservation, putting key species in jeopardy. Cushman in '95, 47 U.S. and Russian environmental groups are writing to express alarm about the negative environmental consequences stemming from growing U.S. federal financing of private companies logging Russia's primary forestry activities. These ventures could destroy unique forest habitats. They could also undermine important biodiversity conservation programs currently underway in the Russian Far East, which are being implemented by the other U.S. federal agencies and nonprofit groups. This loss of ecosystems threatens a global civilization by decreasing the resiliency of the Earth. Global Future Foundation 97, biodiversity is important to the biological health of the planet, therefore to the human race, because diversity contributes to resiliency. A diverse community is more likely to be robust and withstand large-scale disturbances. A world without diversity would be fragile, likely to amplify disturbances and the catastrophe, the collapse of ecosystems that have lost keystone species. Anthropogenic biodiversity reduction has the potential to spin out of control and threaten the prosperity of global civilization. The consensus of scientists agree that the loss of biodiversity threatens the extinction of the Earth. It's bigger than the loss of the dinosaurs. World Watch, October '98, 7 out of 10 biologists believe the world is now in the midst of the fastest mass extinction of living things. That makes it even faster than the crash which occurred when the dinosaurs died some 65 million years ago. The current one is a result of human activity. The scientists surveyed rate of biodiversity loss, a more serious environmental problem than the depletion of the ozone layer, global warming, pollution, and contamination. During the next 30 years, as many as 1/5 of all species alive today will become extinct. Half of the species on Earth will die out in that time. The survey is a dramatic wake-up call to individuals, governments, and institutions that we are facing a truly formidable threat not only to the health of the planet but also to humanity's own well-being and survival, a threat that is virtually unrecognized by the public at large. Thus the plan, through any and all necessary normal consultative means, the U.S. Forestry Service in conjunction with the U.S. Agency for International Development will increase U.S. training and technical assistance to Russia for reforestry. This assistance will emphasize sustainable forestry and will be modeled after Nepal reforestry. Funding is from ending federal financial assistance to U.S. loggers logging Russia, plus any additional funding. Enforcement is guaranteed. We preserve the right to clarify intent. Observation 3, our solvency. Russia wants U.S. environmental assistance to improve credibility and compliance with Russian domestic forestry regulations. Feats and Saladin in '96. Russia is now at a crucial point with Yeltsin. There's much optimism for innovation and reform in Russia's environmental laws. In addition, the Russian government continue their efforts in administrative reform and environmental lawmaking. U.S. technical assistance should be directed at establishing priorities with the reform efforts, breaking the old pattern of lofty and practical statutory standards and building long-term capacity and support for open, transparent, and participatory environmental lawmaking. These activities improve the credibility and compliance with environmental law. U.S. assistance to Russia will preserve biodiversity and guarantee sustainable forest management. Rykoff explains in '96 the Forest Service will cooperate with other bilateral organizations. Our work will promote sustainable production of forest products and services, restore and maintain forest health, mitigate global climate change through improved forest management and conservation, and conserve biological diversity. Work with Russian researchers will help us understand the wealth of knowledge accumulated. Our expertise in modern data analysis techniques and exposure to modern U.S. technology will further open the lines of communication, cooperation, and fire management, and sustainable forestry will have several benefits, including a better understanding of Russian resource base and linkages to global climate change. Empirically, U.S. aid completely halted deforestation in Nepal. The plan can solve 100%. Gingrich in '98, 10 years ago, projections held that Nepal will be completely deforested, causing soil erosion, flooding, depopulation of rural areas, and contributing to regional conflict. U.S. aid, Nepal's assistance to increase private participation in the forest and natural resource management has developed and reduced environmental degradation, slowed global warming, and stabilized Nepal's relations with its neighbors. It has also provided an opportunity to reduce rural-urban integration and accelerate local development. The U.S. is critical. Only the U.S. Forest Service can facilitate the needs of the indigenous peoples in Russia. Rykoff again. The role of indigenous peoples warrants particular attention. Many of the Russian federal forest lands are home to long-standing communities of indigenous peoples. The federal forestry law allows for traditional extraction and use of forest products by indigenous peoples and eliminated the normal licensing and permitting requirements. There is an opportunity to encourage exchanges and cooperation between indigenous peoples in the United States, e.g. Alaska and Russia. The Forest Service can help facilitate this process. U.S. assistance is key to short and long-term institution building. Feats and Saladin, again, ultimately the nature of the reforms in these areas will be up to Russia, but U.S. assistance can be important in the reform process, and short-term U.S. assistance can be directed at providing law and policy advice to the Russian policymakers of Russia to achieve sustainable development. In the long term, it will need to expand its human and institution capacity to carry out law and policy reforms. U.S. assistance can include capacity building in the short term that will aid and strengthen indigenous human institutional capacity and long-term capacity building. Draw a line, it's the underview. Our argument is that pragmatic action solves for oppression and alleviates suffering. Roland Robert, Professor of Communication, Kansas University, 95. The pragmatic approach to the argument provides a means of answering the anthological objections to traditional reason. The view that argument is often the means of enslaving or disempowering people is based on the misunderstanding of how argument as a form of discourse functions. In fact, the danger of symbolic oppression is less applicable to argument as a type of simple use than to other forms. Argument tells us how to solve problems. It can be a force for enslavement to this degree. The successful problem solution is enslaving, and there is a rare event that any society society grounded in democratic ethics. An argument as a form and process is inherently person-respecting because an argument is not a status and force that matters only by reasoning. The principle that humans should test their claims against standards of argumentation theory are tied to pragmatic problem solving as one recognizes fundamental humanity in all people. The argument... That's fine.
So talk to me about the interview.
What's the question?
What are you trying to say?
Say the remark we finished on that kind of.
Yes, true. It's where the paragraph marks, the last paragraph down. Go ahead.
So what are you trying to say in this comment?
Our argument is that pragmatic solutions in argumentation, that pragmatically discussing and arguing possible solutions to our problems avoids to a certain extent the criticism that certain authors talk about is our argument.
Okay, so like because philosophical actions wouldn't be justified to action. Like just to act.
Well, sure, but our argument is that when we're discussing what should be done about certain problems, that those philosophical concerns might not be necessary to discuss. Because our argument is that in a democratic society, a society rooted in democratic ethics, that all people get to participate and all individuals can participate to solve problems. Which means
So you would close off the ability for that discourse to enter the realm of this debate, like the philosophy, they wouldn't be needed?
No, I'm just saying we can pragmatically approach problems. If that means we're using your criticism to pragmatically approach, then that's fine. But our argument is that people have good. Humanity is good. That's what our line says. And when we discuss things with each other, there's rarely times when we have benign motives toward other, malignant motives toward other individuals. But most times it's a forum where people are discussing.
If we have good intentions, then it's all good. If we cause something wrong.
Well, if we have good intentions, sure. I mean, I guess that means.
So that would justify the events that would occur in relation to your good intentions.
No, our argument is that pragmatically we can avoid whatever you're claiming that we're trying to justify.
So like humans are inherently good, and that eventually it become full circle and we justify ourselves.
Well, humans
be good.
Humans in the form. Keep in mind this evidence talks about in the context of discussing. It says argumentation and. It talks about when we're just discussing problems, when we're debating, I guess we can use the term, with each other to find answers to some of the problems we might come across together. We're working together, discussing.
So this is pretty much just like saying pragmatism. It's kind of cool. It's a good option.
Good option.
So that doesn't limit us from saying that there's other options.
We're not trying to close your window here. We're saying pragmatism is a good option.
So your discourse doesn't come before our discourse. Like it's just like we're going to use each other's discourse to find the best solution.
Our pragmatism encompasses all discourse. We pragmatically find the best solution.
Now in this card, right?
Yes.
Well, let's see. In your first card in solvency.
Okay. Is that the Peace card? Peace is Loren?
Right here, yeah. It says that like the U.S. You tag it as Russia wants U.S. environmental assistance to improve credibility, blah blah blah, right? Like it says U.S. technical assistance and then unhighlighted in the legal sphere should be directed at established priorities. So how does that justify doing your plan?
Well, our argument is that the legal sphere will be addressed when we give them assistance for deforestation. We're not excluding.
But the card doesn't actually say that.
Yeah, the card does say that in the legal sphere.